A billionaire CEO saw a nanny breastfeeding his baby. What he did next changed everything. Before we dive in, I want to know, where in the world are you watching from tonight? Type your city in the comments so we can see just how far this story reaches. And when we get to the end, I dare you to rate it from 0 to 10, because this one might just break your heart. Now, settle in and enjoy the story. Inside the mansion of a billionaire CEO, the cry of a newborn echoed through the marble halls like a blade slicing through silence. For 6 relentless hours, no one came. No hand reached out. No voice soothed the tiny chest that heaved with exhaustion. And then, the unthinkable happened. A young housemaid, her body still heavy with grief from losing her own child just weeks ago, rushed upstairs. Her hands trembled as she lifted the infant into her arms. Driven by instinct, by the aching ache of a mother with no baby left to hold, she dared to do what no one else would. She nursed him. In an instant, the crying stopped. The mansion fell into a hush so complete it felt sacred. The baby's tiny face softened against her, his breathing steadying as if her heartbeat had been the one he had been waiting for all along. But just as hope filled the air, the door burst open. And there he was, Daniel Carter, 35, widowed father and CEO of a billion-dollar tech empire. He froze at the sight before him, his eyes wide, his chest rigid, the baby at her breast. What he saw, was it salvation or betrayal? Downstairs, the chandeliers glittered coldly over the marble floors, but none of the mansion's splendor mattered against the raw, desperate sound of his child's cries. Ethan Carter, barely 2 months old, lay in a crib dressed in silk, his little fists shaking in the air. The formula had spoiled hours ago, sour and useless. The highly paid nanny hired from the most prestigious agency in Manhattan had vanished without a trace, leaving only broken promises in her wake. And in the basement, Isabella Torres, 24, was on her knees scrubbing the same spot of floor until her palms bled. 6 weeks earlier, she had buried her firstborn, a child who never lived long enough to open his eyes. That grief still lived inside her, raw and unhealed. Every cry from upstairs was like a knife twisting deeper, mocking her body that still produced milk, a cruel reminder of the child she could no longer hold. Meanwhile, in his office, Daniel Carter sat behind a wall of screens glowing with charts and numbers, the pressure of Japanese investors tightening like a vice. His wife's portrait stood on the desk, her eyes following him in quiet reproach. He had promised her he would keep their child alive. And yet, night after night, he was losing both battles, the company and the boy. Until now. Until the moment when Ethan's cry cracked into silence, faint and fading. Isabella dropped her rag and raced up the staircase, her legs quivering beneath her. One decision made in the desperate heart of a night too long would alter the fate of all 3 of them forever. So let me ask you, do you believe a mother's love can cross every boundary, even the cold, unbreakable walls of a billionaire CEO's heart? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Chapter 1. A Mother's Instinct. The sound pierced the night like a blade through silence. The cry of a 2-month-old baby wasn't just noise, it was desperation itself, a warning that fragile life was slipping away. Inside the mansion of Daniel Carter, a billionaire CEO whose weary eyes were always fixed on numbers and deadlines, the cries echoed against marble walls, carving their way into every listener's heart. Downstairs, Isabella Torres knelt on the polished floor, her small hands gripping a rag as she scrubbed the same spotless patch for the 3rd time. Her dark eyes were hollow, but her chest clenched tighter with every wail from above. 6 weeks ago, these same arms had rocked her own little angel, a child who had slipped away before he ever had the chance to whisper "Mama." Her arms were empty, but her body betrayed her. Each morning, her chest still ached heavy with milk, a cruel reminder as though her baby still existed somewhere calling for her. And so every cry from the nursery upstairs was torture. It tore open wounds that had barely begun to close. She whispered, hoarse and broken, "The baby will collapse if this goes on." But instead of rising, she scrubbed harder, as though keeping her hands busy could quiet the storm inside her chest. Yet the more she tried to drown it out, the louder the cries became, thinner now, weaker like a rope fraying strand by strand. In his office, Daniel Carter sat before glowing screens, the clipped voices of Japanese investors demanding, "Mr. Carter, do you confirm the deal?" He nodded mechanically, but his gaze had already drifted to the photo on his desk. Claire, his late wife. She had died giving birth to Ethan, leaving behind a titan of industry undone by grief. A father who could barely soothe his own child. For a moment, Daniel's hand tightened around his pen, his chest heavy as stone. Upstairs, Ethan writhed in his silk-lined crib face, blotched red lips cracked and dry. The bottle beside him had spoiled hours ago, its sour stench thick in the air. Melissa, the high-priced nanny, hired from an exclusive agency, had vanished long before, off chasing her own pleasures beneath the glittering lights of Manhattan. 1 second passed, then another. Isabella dropped her rag. Her pulse thundered. Every vein in her body felt ready to burst. She stumbled toward the staircase, her trembling hands clutching the banister. Each step resounded like a war drum, an urgent march of a mother's instinct. "Dear God, don't let this child die in my arms." The nursery door swung open, and Isabella froze. There lay Ethan, limp as an abandoned angel. His eyes half shut, breath shallow and faltering like a candle about to be snuffed out. His small body burned with fever beads of sweat sliding across his brow like sparks from smoldering ash. Terror ripped through Isabella. There was no time to think of boundaries, of wealth, of the judgment that would surely come. Only one truth remained: if she did nothing, the child would die. She gathered him into her arms. The heat of his fragile body blurred her vision. He whimpered weakly, his tiny mouth opening, searching. And from somewhere deeper than reason, deeper than fear, came the thunderous call of her maternal instinct. Through tears, Isabella whispered, "Sweetheart, let me save you." She sank into the armchair by the window, her hands trembling as she cradled Ethan. His breaths rattled against her chest, fragile, fleeting. Every sound was a knife across the scars of her broken heart. "He won't last if I just sit here," she thought, brushing damp hair from his forehead. His cracked lips parted, desperate, searching for life itself. And in that moment, a decision rose inside her, one she could neither resist nor delay. For 6 long weeks, her body had produced milk no child could drink. Every morning she woke, aching, punished by nature's cruel reminder that her son was gone. She had tried everything: pills, prayer, even ice baths to make it stop. But the ache remained because the longing remained. And now fate had placed another fragile soul before her. Not her child, no, but a child nonetheless. And only she could keep him alive. Her fingers shook as she fumbled with the buttons of her blouse. Her heart pounded so loud it felt like the mansion itself had gone silent to listen. "Lord, forgive me, but I cannot watch this boy die in my arms." She drew him close, guiding his lips to the only lifeline she could offer. And then it happened. Miraculously, Ethan latched on, drinking deeply, desperately, as though this was the first water in a desert. The cries ceased. The air shifted. Silence fell, not the silence of death, but of peace. The fragile rhythm of life returned, the steady sound of swallowing, the soft exhale of breath no longer in danger. A sob broke from Isabella's chest. Tears spilled down her cheeks, dampening the baby's fine hair. For weeks her milk had been a cruel torment, but tonight every drop was a miracle. Tonight it gave her back what grief had stolen: the chance to be a mother again, if only for this moment. "You're safe now, little one. Drink. Live." Ethan's tiny fist clutched at her blouse, weak but determined, clinging not just to life, but to her. In that moment, Isabella understood there were no masters, no servants, no wealth, no poverty. There was only a child and a woman's love. Outside the window, sunset draped the sky in muted gold. Yet within Isabella's chest, another light had kindled for the first time in weeks. She held Ethan tighter, as though she were holding her own lost son once more. And in her trembling embrace, a sacred truth prevailed. Instinct, love, and life itself had triumphed over every boundary. Time itself seemed to hold its breath. In Isabella's arms, Ethan grew still. The feverish flush on his cheeks softened, his breathing slowed into fragile rhythm. Each swallow was a knock on death's door, and with every drop that door opened wider toward life. Leaning back against the armchair by the window, Isabella closed her eyes for a moment. On her hollow face, a gentler light flickered for the first time in weeks. The cries were gone. In their place came a tender sound she had thought she would never hear again, the soft, steady gulp of a child feeding alive and safe. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks, soaking into Ethan's downy hair. For 6 weeks, her milk had been nothing but torment. Tonight, it was salvation. She bent her lips toward his tiny ear and whispered, fragile as breath sleep, "Now, Mama will keep you safe." For that fleeting moment, she forgot the marble floors and glittering chandeliers, forgot her lowly station as a servant in a world of wealth. All that remained was the blaze of maternal love, untamed, unstoppable, bound by no wall or rule. In her arms, Ethan's body loosened. His little fingers clenched at her blouse, then fell slack in peace. He drifted into slumber, mouth still pressed faintly to her breast, his breath shallow but steady. Isabella drew in a long breath, and for the first time since her own loss, a fragile peace filled her chest. But peace is always a candle flame in the wind. The door creaked. Isabella's eyes flew open. Through the golden veil of sunset seeping past the curtains, a shadow filled the frame. Daniel Carter. He stood motionless, struck as if by lightning. His weary eyes, worn hollow from endless meetings and sleepless nights, widened at the sight before him, Isabella blouse half open, cradling his son against her chest. The soft light of dusk painted them in hues too tender, too human to belong in his world of contracts and numbers. And yet he could not name what he saw. Was it betrayal, salvation, or something far more dangerous, something that pulled at the heart he thought long buried with his wife? For several long seconds, Daniel could not breathe. His chest tightened, his heart pounding wild and uneven. The cold voice of a CEO screamed in his head, "Impossible. She's just the help." But deeper in a place he tried to silence, another voice rose. "Your son, for the first time in weeks, is at peace in her arms." Isabella froze. Panic surged through her. Clutching Ethan tighter, she fumbled to cover her chest, her eyes wide with dread. Words stumbled from her lips, broken and trembling. "Sir, I can explain." The room thickened, every mote of dust suspended in silence. Daniel stepped forward once, then stopped, his fists clenched at his sides. His gaze flicked from his child, calm at last, to the young woman whose tears still glistened. His heart warred within him rage, shock, and something unnamed too raw to admit. This was the moment that would change everything. A billionaire CEO bound to reputation, a poor girl broken by loss, and a child whose life depended on them both. No one spoke. The only sound was the clock ticking, each second a countdown to the storm that was about to break. So let me ask you, if you were Daniel, if you walked in on this moment, would you trust what your eyes told you, or would you listen to your heart? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Chapter 2. Caught by the CEO. The room seemed to lose its air. Daniel Carter stood framed in the doorway, the tall silhouette of a billionaire CEO bathed in the dim glow of sunset. The orange light washed over his black suit, sharpening the edges of his already rigid features. But his eyes that had scanned thousands of contracts and balance sheets, now burned with something else: shock, fury, and confusion. Before him was a sight his reason could not accept. Isabella, the poor maid, barely past 20, sitting in the armchair, blouse unfastened, cradling his son in her arms. Ethan, who had screamed himself hoarse for hours, now lay sleeping peacefully, his lips still pressed against her breast, as though it were the only place he belonged. Daniel's chest tightened, his body rigid, his heart hammering against his ribs. Part of him wanted to tear the child from her arms, to roar at the trespass, the violation. But another part, smaller, weaker, yet piercingly true, wanted to close the door and let the moment remain, because for the first time in weeks, his son was at peace. Isabella froze, her face drained of color, her eyes wide with terror. She clutched Ethan closer, shielding him from the blaze of Daniel's stare. Words caught in her throat before tumbling out in a trembling rush. Sir, I can explain." Daniel stepped forward. The strike of his polished shoes against the wooden floor echoed like a gavel. He halted, his gaze drilling into her, his voice low and storm-laden. "Explain, you call this an explanation?" Tears streaked Isabella's cheeks, falling onto Ethan's soft skin. Her voice cracked, fragile yet fierce. The bottle was spoiled. He couldn't go on any longer. I couldn't just stand by and watch him die in front of me. Her words splintered the air like shards of glass. Daniel fell silent, his chest twisting. He looked at Ethan, his son, who for the first time in weeks was not flushed with screaming or gasping for air. The child slept peacefully, tiny hands gripping Isabella's blouse as if clinging to life itself. Daniel's mind spun. Should he trust his eyes or the truth pounding inside his chest? He drew a sharp breath, trying to cage the storm within. He was a CEO, a man who had mastered control markets, investors, rivals. But here, staring at this impossible scene, he had lost it completely. His voice broke out hard as steel. "Do you have any idea what you've done, Isabella? You've crossed every boundary." She shook her head desperately, tears flowing freely. "I didn't think. I couldn't. The boy, he was slipping away." Daniel's jaw clenched. Her words pierced him, for deep inside he knew she was telling the truth. Yet reason, bound tight by pride and reputation, screamed this was unforgivable. He moved closer, his shadow falling over her, his voice trembling with rage and pain. "You think my son needs you? You are nothing but a servant." Isabella flinched, her arms tightening around Ethan as though his words had lashed her flesh. Her voice shook but did not break. "I know I am nothing in this house. But that child, he needed someone. And tonight I was the only one left." The air thickened until even the tick of the clock struck like a hammer. Daniel's eyes fell once more on his son, resting peacefully for the first time since his mother's death. The sight shredded his heart. He thought of Claire, his wife, the vow at her grave, "I will protect him no matter what." And yet it was not him keeping that promise now, not a nanny from an agency, but this maid who had lost her own child, now giving everything she had left to keep his son alive. The world tilted beneath him. Daniel Carter, a billionaire, a master of negotiations, stood defeated before one undeniable truth. His son's life now rested in the arms of a woman society would scorn, if they ever knew. His voice cracked, almost a whisper meant for himself. Is this a mistake or a miracle? Isabella lifted her tear-stained face, her words barely audible. "Call it whatever you wish, but tonight, Ethan is alive." The simplicity of her words thundered through Daniel's mind. He turned away, bracing a trembling hand against the window ledge. Outside, the sky blazed red with dying light, but in his chest all was chaos. He had survived boardrooms, press ambushes, cutthroat CEOs, but never had he felt so powerless. Behind him, Ethan breathed in steady rhythm, the sound of peace filling the room. For the first time in weeks, his child did not cry. He did not suffer. He simply slept. And his tiny hand clung not to Daniel, but to her. Jealousy burned sharp in his chest. He, Daniel Carter, a father, a billionaire, was helpless, while his son's comfort lay in the arms of a servant. His voice lashed out harsh to mask the weakness within. "Do you realize what you've done to this family's honor? If anyone sees this, what will they think of me?" Isabella's arms tightened protectively around the child. Tears streamed as she choked out, "I didn't think of honor. I thought only of his life. If you must blame someone, blame me. But don't put this on him. He's innocent." Her words struck him like arrows. Daniel stared at her, the hollow cheeks, the tear-bright eyes, the frail frame radiating a strength he could not name. The strength of a mother's love. In that moment he saw more than a maid. He saw a grieving mother, a soul shattered yet unyielding, pouring every last fragment of her heart into saving a child not her own. And it terrified him. He feared the bond forming here. He feared the eyes of society. He feared the stirring of his own heart. Daniel stepped back, shadows deepening in his eyes. His voice cracked, jagged with anger and fear. "You will leave this room. Now." The air froze solid. Isabella clutched Ethan tighter, her shoulders trembling, but she didn't dare defy him. Slowly, carefully, she lowered the child back into the crib. Her lips brushed his damp forehead in a final, trembling kiss. A tear slipped from her lashes and landed softly on his cheek. Ethan stirred but did not wake. His tiny chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, proof that for tonight he was safe. Yet the sight only twisted Daniel's chest tighter until he thought his heart might split apart. He turned sharply toward the window, as though afraid that if he lingered another moment, he would lose the will to cast her out. The room settled into silence again, but it was no longer peace. It was silence stretched taut, as a wire one touch away from snapping. Isabella sank onto the edge of the bed, her hand pressed against her chest, where milk still flowed, where her heart still hammered in terrified chaos. The baby slept soundly, his cheeks flushed pink with health, the undeniable proof that her desperate act had saved him. But the look in Daniel's eyes had burned away any comfort she might have felt. He stood rigid at the window, his broad frame rimmed in the last glow of dusk. His shoulders strained, his fists clenched so tightly the veins rose across his skin. When he spoke, his voice was low and cold, a sentence passed down. "What happened here tonight will not be spoken of to anyone." Isabella lifted her tear-soaked eyes. "Sir, enough." Daniel's voice cut like a whip. His words hissed through gritted teeth. "If this gets out, you'll destroy everything, not only my reputation, but your future as well." Her lips trembled. The sharp taste of blood spread across her tongue, where she had bitten down to keep from crying out. She knew he was right. Society would never forgive her a poor maid who dared cross the boundaries of class, who dared nurse the heir of a powerful family. They would call her mad. They would call her shameless. Her voice cracked, broken as glass. "I only wanted to save him." Daniel turned, then his eyes bloodshot, not only with anger, but with exhaustion and grief long buried. He studied her for a long moment before speaking again, his words heavy as nails. "And you did what no one else in this house dared to do. But I cannot watch it happen again." The words struck like both confession and condemnation. Isabella's body shook. She bowed her head, tears falling in heavy drops onto the polished wooden floor. The mansion seemed impossibly vast, yet the only sounds were the ticking of the clock and the muffled sobs of a woman who had stepped across a line she could never return from. Daniel faced the window once more, his voice hoarse as though speaking only to himself. "God, my son was just saved, so why does it feel like I've lost everything?" The words were not for her yet. They split her heart wide open. She understood. This night had not only delivered a fragile child back into life, it had also sown the seeds of a storm that could ruin them both. The lamp's light fell across three figures. A powerful man cracked beneath his armor, a poor woman, her heart bleeding in silence, and an innocent child asleep, unaware that his very survival had become the center of a fate none of them could escape. So let me ask you, if you were Isabella, would you stay silent to protect the child, even knowing that silence could destroy your own name? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Chapter 3. Whispers of Society. The Carter Mansion's kitchen looked no different than any other afternoon. Pots simmered, silver gleamed, and footsteps echoed across the tiled floor. But for Isabella, every second was torment. Since the night Daniel had caught her, she had lived as if walking on the edge of a blade, silent, careful, never daring an extra glance or word. Ethan was stronger now, sleeping more deeply than before. That should have been proof enough that what she'd done had saved his life. But in this house, truth mattered far less than appearances. Melissa swept in from her so-called milk errand, arms weighed down with shopping bags from luxury boutiques. Her crimson lips curled into a smile as she spotted Isabella bent over the dining table. She leaned in, close, voice dripping with poison meant to spread. "You know, I saw something dreadful." The older maid paused, curious. Melissa narrowed her eyes, flicking a glance toward Isabella before whispering, "That girl, she's gone mad." She clutched the baby as if he were her own. "Everyone knows she lost a child not long ago. She's obsessed. Who knows what she's done to him?" The words fell like drops of ink into clear water. One drop was enough to stain the whole glass. The old maid gasped, covering her mouth. Melissa straightened, satisfied, and drifted away, leaving behind only the haze of suspicion. It didn't take long for the whispers to escape the gates. A servant repeated it to a shopkeeper. The shopkeeper repeated it to a friend at the ladies' club. Piece by piece, rumor grew into a grotesque picture, a grieving maid unhinged by loss, daring to nurse the son of a billionaire. By evening it had become the subject of murmurs in hallways, coffeehouses, even the glittering parlors of high society wives. Isabella knew none of it. She only felt the shift in the household, the curious stares, the wary glances, the faint curl of disdain. A storm was forming, and she, the weakest among them, stood at its very center. The next morning she walked to the market with another maid. A simple wicker basket hung from her arm, but the weight of stares pressed on her like stones. At the vegetable stand, wealthy housewives bent close their voices, just loud enough for her to hear, "That's her, the one who lost her baby. They say she thinks Carter's boy is her own. Frightening, isn't it?" Another laughed softly, cruelly. A poor girl clinging to someone else's child, as if she could ever take the mother's place. The words lashed her like whips. Isabella's head bowed, her fingers whitening around the basket's handle. Inside, she wanted to scream, "It's not true. I only saved his life." But her throat tightened. Her voice strangled before it could rise. On the way home, she felt it more sharply. Neighbors who once greeted her turned away. Children who once tugged at her skirt were pulled back by their mother's whispers trailing behind. "Stay away, darling. They say she's dangerous." Her world shrank. The sky itself seemed to press down on her shoulders. She was not afraid of labor, nor of hunger. What she feared most were the eyes cold judging and the whispers tearing at her dignity. That evening, Isabella sat alone in the kitchen, hands clenched in her lap. Laughter spilled from the parlor where Daniel's wealthy guests raised glasses over business deals. And beneath the clink of crystal, she caught the sharp voice of a society woman. "I hear Carter's maid has done something unspeakable. How shameful." The table roared with laughter. Isabella's heart plummeted into darkness. She buried her face in her hands, sobs muffled by her palms. Truth meant nothing. People wanted only a story to gossip about, someone to condemn. And this time, she was the sacrifice. That night, chandeliers glittered over the women's club. Wine shimmered in crystal glasses as Daniel entered, tall and composed, every inch the billionaire CEO. Yet behind his calm facade, the image of Isabella cradling Ethan haunted him still. From a corner, he heard the whispers, "Shocking. A maid gone mad. They say she lost her mind and clung to Carter's child like her own. Sickening. Poor Daniel Carter. His wife gone, and now this disgrace." His fingers tightened around the stem of his glass until his knuckles blanched. He forced his face to remain unreadable, but inside fury twisted with something sharper. He could endure attacks on his business, on his name. But not whispers aimed at his innocent child or at the woman who had saved him. A shareholder clasped his hand, smiling politely, but his words slid in like a blade. "Daniel, be careful. The Japanese deal is near. No one wants to hear rumors of a mad maid tied to the Carter name. Reputation is everything. Don't lose it over weakness." Weakness. The word stung. None of them knew that if not for that so-called weakness, his son might already be dead. Later, Daniel stepped onto the balcony. The night wind tugged at his hair as he gripped the railing hard enough to hurt. His wife's voice seemed to echo from memory, "Protect our son at all costs." But what did protection mean? Was it casting out the woman who saved his child just to keep society's approval? Or was it standing by truth? Even if it made him a laughingstock, that question gnawed at him all the way home. At dawn, Isabella stepped out to fetch bread for Ethan's breakfast. Sunshine spilled across the street. But for her, it wasn't warmth. It was exposure, harsh and merciless. At the bakery, 3 wealthy women paused their chatter when she approached. Then, with mocking smiles, their voices rose. There she is, the pretend mother. Poor Mr. Carter saddled with such madness. If I were him, I'd have thrown her out long ago. Each word sliced like a whip. Isabella stiffened, clutching the basket against her chest. Heat burned her face, but she said nothing. She lowered her head and walked faster, shame pressing her down like chains. Back at the mansion, she caught the muffled laughter of 2 servants in the kitchen. I hear the master shouted at her again last night. Serves her right. Doing something so insane. Her lips parted, but no words came. A voice inside whispered, "If you speak, will they believe you, or will they simply call you madder still?" That night she sat quietly by Ethan's crib. He slept soundly, lips parted in a child's dream. Her tears fell as she whispered, "The world may hate me, but I have never regretted saving you." Each word tore at her soul because she knew tomorrow the storm would grow. And once society branded someone guilty, no truth could ever wash the stain away. Outside, the wind howled against the windows, mocking merciless. Isabella wrapped her arms around herself, trembling. For the first time in weeks, she felt utterly, devastatingly alone. Chapter 4. Dismissed. That night, the Carter mansion burned with light long past midnight. Daniel sat in his office surrounded by stacks of unfinished reports. Yet his eyes lingered not on numbers or contracts, but on the phone that lay silent after an avalanche of messages and calls from shareholders, from the press, from so-called friends of high society. "Daniel, this scandal is spreading. If you don't act, we'll reconsider our trust in you. A CEO who lets his family fall into disgrace. How long will the company remain respected? Fire the maid. End this, and the rumors will fade." The words pounded like hammers, pressing him deeper into the storm. Daniel lowered his head, covering his face with both hands. But behind his closed eyes, he saw it again, Isabella in the armchair. Ethan in her arms, breathing peacefully, as if heaven itself had bent low to shelter him. His chest ached. Yet the voices of society, the mocking laughter, the contemptuous stares, cut just as sharply. In the hollow stillness, he whispered into the night voice, raw, clear, "If you were here, what would you do? Would you forgive me? If I cast out the woman who saved our son's life?" Outside wind rushed through the trees, leaves hissing like whispers in the dark. And Daniel knew he stood at a crossroads. The road of honor or the road of the heart. Like so many CEOs before him, he forced himself toward reason, not feeling. He pressed the pen to paper, signing a verdict no one but he could write. Isabella must go. Rising from his chair, he stepped into the hall. The dim gold of the sconces painted his face in half-light. He did not look like a titan of industry then, but like a man walking toward the gravest mistake of his life. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall windows of his office. Daniel sat waiting in the black leather chair posture, straight face shadowed with gloom. On the desk lay a blank page littered with scratched-out attempts at words he could not bring himself to say. A soft knock. "Sir?" "You called for me." Isabella's voice trembled from the hallway. Daniel swallowed hard, fingers tightening around the pen. When the door opened, she stepped in simple beige dress, hair pulled back neatly, eyes still swollen from sleepless nights. Something inside him twisted. She looked like a wildflower trampled underfoot, fragile yet still refusing to bow. The silence pressed heavy. Finally, Daniel drew in a breath. "Isabella, sit." She shook her head softly. I'll stand, sir." He gave a brief nod, then fell quiet again as if buying time. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, each word a blade. "You know the rumors aren't small anymore. They've pulled my family, my company, everything into their storm." Isabella lowered her head, hands clasped tightly together. Tears welled, but she forced them down. "I understand, sir. I never wanted to harm your name. I only couldn't stand by and watch the child." Her words broke, but Daniel cut across his tone, sharp and final. "Isabella, you're dismissed." The silence that followed was unbearable. Isabella's head snapped up, eyes wide, glistening like glass about to shatter. "Sir, what did you say?" Daniel turned away, unable to meet her gaze. His fists clenched, his voice dropped. "I know you saved Ethan. I'm grateful, but I can't keep you here. Not now." Her tears broke free, rolling down her cheeks in torrents. She stumbled one step forward, her voice breaking with desperation. "Please, don't send me away. At least let me say goodbye to him. He needs me." Her plea ripped through Daniel's chest, his lips pressed into a hard line, his hands trembling. But in the end, he turned away, voice hoarse. "The longer you stay, the worse this becomes. Go, Isabella." The room fell still, heavy as stone. Isabella sank to her knees, face buried in her hands, sobs muffled by the cold walls. Daniel shut his eyes, but the image branded itself onto his soul, the one woman who had saved his son, driven out by his own hand, and he knew he would carry that image for the rest of his life. A soft knock broke the silence. "Sir, you called for me?" Isabella's voice trembled from the hallway. Daniel swallowed hard, fingers tightening around his pen. When the door opened, she stepped in a simple beige dress, hair pulled back neatly, her eyes swollen from too many sleepless nights. In that moment, his heart gave a painful twist. She looked like a wildflower crushed underfoot, fragile yet stubbornly upright. The air in the room was heavy, suffocating. Daniel drew a deep breath. "Isabella, sit." She shook her head faintly. I'll stand, sir." He gave a short nod, silence stretching thin between them. Finally, his voice broke through, low and rough. "You know the rumors aren't small anymore. They've pulled my family, my company, everything into their storm." Isabella lowered her head, fingers laced tightly together. Tears welled, but she forced them down. "I understand, sir. I never meant to harm your name. I only couldn't watch the child." Her voice cracked, but Daniel cut across each word, sharp as steel. "Isabella, you're dismissed." The silence that followed was unbearable. Isabella's head jerked up, her eyes wide, glassy with disbelief. "Sir, what did you say?" Daniel turned away, unable to meet her gaze. His jaw clenched, his voice dropping to a heavy murmur. "I know you saved Ethan. I am grateful. But I can't keep you here. Not now." Tears streamed freely down her cheeks. She stumbled a step forward, pleading, "Please, don't send me away. At least, let me say goodbye to Ethan. He needs me." Her words tore straight through his chest. Daniel bit down hard, his hands shaking. But in the end, he turned his face away, voice hoarse. "The longer you stay, the worse this becomes. Go, Isabella." The room fell into stillness. Isabella collapsed to her knees, hands covering her face, her sobs echoing against the cold walls. Daniel shut his eyes, but the image seared itself into his memory, the one woman who had saved his son, now cast out by his own hand. Outside, storm clouds gathered. The sky turned gray, heavy with rain. Isabella clutched a small cloth bag against her chest, inside only a few worn dresses and the little notebook where she had written her last words to the child she lost. She stepped down the marble stairs of the Carter mansion just as the rain began to fall. First a drizzle, then a torrent pounding against the stone as her footsteps dragged heavily beneath her. At the gate, the old butler met her with eyes full of pity. "Isabella, I'm sorry." She gave him a faint, broken smile, bowing her head. But apologies could change nothing. Through the downpour, she walked on her hair plastered to her pale face, her dress clinging to her thin frame. Each step felt like a blow against her own heart. From the second-floor window, Daniel stood frozen, watching the small figure fade into the storm. His palm pressed hard against the glass lips, pressed tight. Inside, his heart screamed, "Don't go. Come back." But reason, cold, merciless reason, kept his mouth shut. Behind him, Ethan's cry rose, suddenly piercing through the sound of rain. The baby's wail cut sharp, raw, echoing through the mansion like a wound torn open again. Daniel's hand curled into a fist, veins straining beneath his skin. He knew his son was reaching for the arms he had just driven away. Outside, Isabella stopped beneath a great oak at the roadside. She clutched her bag tight to her chest, tilted her face to the sky, letting rain and tears wash together. Her whisper vanished into the storm. "Ethan, forgive me. I couldn't protect you to the end." Each drop of rain carved deeper into her heart. A grieving mother, a shamed woman, a soul who had saved a life only to be buried beneath society's judgment. She walked on her frail figure, dissolving into the gray curtain of rain like a leaf carried away in the storm. From the window, Daniel watched until she vanished at the street's corner. His eyes burned red, but no tears fell. Only his chest ached so fiercely he thought he might collapse. That night, the Carter mansion was no longer a place of splendor, but a hollow shell. Daniel sat in his office, face gaunt beneath the yellow glow of the lamp. Emails piled across his laptop screen, partners in Japan, the board investors, but he couldn't read a single word. His mind replayed only one image: Isabella walking away in the rain, carrying his son's cries with her, and those cries still echoed now. From Ethan's nursery, the baby wailed until his voice broke, weak and desperate. Daniel rushed in, finding Melissa fumbling helplessly with a bottle. Ethan thrashed, refusing her touch, sobbing until his skin flushed purple. "Why won't he stop?" Melissa muttered, frustration etched on her face. Daniel lifted his son, whispering desperately, "Ethan, it's me. Daddy's here. Don't cry, please." But the boy writhed, his tiny arms reaching, searching for the warmth he had lost. Through the storm outside, through his son's cries, Daniel felt his world crumbling. He walked the halls, carried the child from room to room, but the crying only grew jagged and unrelenting. No one slept that night. Ethan wept until exhaustion dragged him into a fitful sleep. Daniel sank into the armchair, holding him tight, staring out the rain-streaked window. His whisper broke the silence, bitter and cracked. "Did I do what's right? Or did I just make the greatest mistake of my life?" But the darkness gave no answer, only the hollow silence heavy as his own heart. And somewhere across the city, Isabella huddled beneath the shelter of a bus stop. Her dress still drenched, her arms wrapped around the little cloth bag. The night was cold, but colder still was the emptiness in her chest. She closed her eyes, and in the darkness she heard it again, Ethan's cries, haunting her soul. That night, two lives, one of a billionaire, one of a maid, lay sleepless under the same storm, divided by class, by judgment, by fear, yet bound by one truth, that neither could escape. A child's heart still tied them together, even as they pushed each other apart. Chapter 5. Wandering the streets. The rain had stopped, but the streets still shimmered with puddles. Isabella sat curled on a park bench, her thin dress clinging to her cold, wet skin. In her arms, she hugged a small cloth bag, everything she had left in the world. Across the street, headlights streaked past. Laughter drifted from a group of young partygoers spilling out of a cab. They didn't even glance her way. To them, she was invisible. A shadow. She pulled her knees close, her eyes lifting toward the sky where gray clouds still lingered. In her head, Ethan's cries echoed, each sound like a knife to the chest. Tears slipped free, mixing with the damp chill of the night. "Ethan, do you think of me?" she whispered, her voice breaking. That night she never closed her eyes. Every rustle in the dark made her flinch. Night no longer meant rest, it was a trap waiting to spring. She had never known the streets to be so merciless. When dawn came, the first weak light fell across her pale face. Isabella stared at her trembling hands, her fingers stiff from the cold. Yet inside, a small voice whispered, "Whatever happens, I will not lose my dignity. No one can take away the last piece of pride I hold." By late afternoon, the sky sagged low again, heavy with clouds. Street lamps flickered on early, casting the boulevards in weary yellow light. Isabella clutched her bag close, walking quickly along the damp pavement. Her heels burned with every step, her shoes worn through the leather, cutting into her skin like needles. At last she stopped behind a supermarket. Metal bins lined the alley, reeking of waste. She gripped the strap of her bag, torn between pride and the hollow ache of hunger clawing inside her. Tonight, without food, she knew she might collapse. She lifted the lid of the third bin. A sour smell rose up. Inside lay expired yogurt cups and a loaf of bread, soft with age but still whole. She hesitated only a moment before gently lifting the loaf, brushing it off, placing it carefully in her bag as though it were treasure. "Hey, what are you doing there?" The voice startled her. She spun. 3 men stood in the shadows, the sharp stench of cheap liquor rolling off them. One with a knit cap tugged low, sneered, "Pretty girl like you digging through trash, shame. We've got a spot under the docks, warm, private. Come share with us, and maybe we'll let you stay." Isabella stepped back, clutching her bag tighter. Her legs trembled, but her voice came out steady. "I don't need it. Thank you." The man laughed. "Thank you. Nothing's free out here, doll." He moved closer. Isabella's throat clenched dry. She wanted to scream, but no sound came. Then a rough cough sounded behind them. "Leave her alone." From the darkness stepped an old man, thin as a reed, his hair a wild crown of silver. His coat was frayed at the shoulders, a wooden cane in his hand. But his eyes, clear, sharp, steady, held their ground. His voice was low, deliberate. "She's new. No one touches a newcomer without a place to stay. That's the rule." The man in the knit cap snarled. "What rule?" "The rule of this street." The old man's voice cut like gravel. "My name's Howard. Anyone living under the Caracas overpass knows that name." A tense pause followed. The other 2 exchanged wary looks. At last they pulled their friend back, muttering curses as they melted into the dark. Isabella exhaled shakily, her knees weak until she sank onto the step behind her. "Thank you," she whispered. The old man waved a hand. "Come on." Under the bridge, it sheltered fewer eyes watching. The first night on the street is always longer than you think. Isabella hesitated, instinct, urging caution. But in his eyes she saw no malice, only something weary and strangely familiar. Compassion. Slowly she rose and followed. The slope down to the river was slick with moss, the air sharp with damp. Beneath the concrete arch, small fires flickered in tin cans. 4 or 5 figures sat huddled in old coats, each clutching a worn bag or tied-up plastic sack. The air smelled of wet wood smoke and river silt. For the first time since leaving the mansion, Isabella realized she was no longer just alone. She was entering the hidden world of those who had already lost everything. "This is our home," Howard said. His voice was gravelly but not unkind. "Not much to look at, but it's better than the sidewalks. The rules here are simple: share when you can stay quiet, when you must protect each other when the world pushes us out. And," his eyes locked with Isabella's, "no matter how much mud we live in, we hold on to dignity. Do you understand?" The word dignity struck Isabella's chest like a hand pressing on an open wound. She nodded, voice low. "I understand." A stout woman with graying hair reached out her hand. "I'm Mercedes. Come sit, child. Your lips are blue with cold." She pushed a piece of cardboard toward her. Isabella sat gratefully. Mercedes poured a dark, steaming liquid from a dented kettle into a crumpled paper cup and handed it over. "Tea? Well, not really. Boiled from bruised apples we found with a bit of sugar. Warms the stomach." "Thank you, Isabella," whispered, her hands trembling as she held the cup. The warmth seeped into her fingers, then down into her hollow stomach. A younger man with his arms strapped in a brace nodded at her. "I'm Jack. Used to work the docks. Hurt my back, lost the job, lost the room, and ended up here." Isabella gripped the paper cup tighter. "I'm Isabella." Her own name caught in her throat. Once it had been whispered over her child's cradle. Once it had been neatly written on her job application at the Carter mansion. Now it floated in the air like a splinter of wood drifting on a dark river. Howard glanced at her soaked shoes. Then he held out a pair of wool socks, thin and worn, but clean. "Walk through rain like that, you'll catch fever. Take these." "I'll wash them and give them back," Isabella murmured. Howard chuckled, deep lines creasing his face. "No need. No one here owes anyone. We give what we have, so we remember we're still human." Mercedes stirred the fire, then asked softly, "Do you have family nearby, Isabella?" A gust of wind tore at Isabella's hair. She stared into the dying fire, her voice barely a whisper. "I once did. Not anymore." Howard spoke gently. "Then, tonight, think of this as family. Sleep. Tomorrow will be different. The first night is always the longest, but no night lasts forever. The simple words soothed her like a lullaby. Isabella curled into the thin blanket Mercedes handed her, resting her head on her small cloth bag. The earth's damp chill crept into her bones, but for the first time since leaving the gates of the mansion, she was not entirely alone. She closed her eyes. Somewhere above, a train whistle echoed. The river slapped gently against the banks, and in the hush of the bridge she thought she heard a child's laughter. Her lips curved faintly as she whispered a name, Ethan. Sleep well, my love. Howard pulled a tattered tarp lower to shield them from the wind. He watched Isabella for a moment, then nodded quietly like a man guarding a fragile flame in the long night. Across the city, beneath glittering chandeliers, the wealthy raised crystal glasses. But here, under a leaking concrete bridge, 5 people shared a cup of apple tea and a patch of dry ground. The worlds were impossibly far apart. And yet, in this crack of darkness, a thin stream of warmth flowed, called humanity. Isabella pulled the blanket tighter to her chest. Her eyes stung, but not only from the cold. A drop of warmth slid through her heart enough to remind her she would not shatter tonight. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the cracks of the bridge, scattering across the glittering river. Isabella stirred, weary, but alive. The first sound she heard was the chatter of her companions as they reheated thin porridge over a dented pot. Howard greeted her with a smile. "Welcome to a new day at the Caracas Bridge Inn." The group chuckled, a ragged, broken sound, but alive all the same. Isabella found herself smiling faintly, even as her eyes filled with tears. Breakfast was little more than watery porridge with scraps of spoiled potato, but as they ate, Howard recited the unspoken code of their world. Don't steal from each other. Don't sell one another out for food. Share when you can. And he paused, meeting Isabella's eyes. Even if you sleep on cardboard, never forget you are still human. Isabella nodded hard. Her heart ached, but also stirred. For weeks, she had been called crazy, filthy, dangerous. Yet under this crumbling bridge, for the first time, someone reminded her that she was still a person. That afternoon, sirens blared. Police boots thundered down the embankment. Clear out. No loitering here. The group scrambled to gather what little they owned. Mercedes clutched her plastic bag. Jack winced as he tried to lift with his injured arm. An officer yanked Isabella's cardboard from beneath her, tossing it into the mud. She bit her lip hard, hugging her cloth bag close. Howard stepped forward, voice calm. "We'll go. Don't touch their things." The officer sneered but said no more. The boots stomped away, leaving humiliation heavy in the air. Isabella felt the sting of it deeper than the cold. That night, lying on the damp ground, she whispered to Howard, "Why didn't you fight back?" His eyes stayed on the shadows. Because dignity doesn't always mean fighting. Sometimes it means bowing your head so you can survive and wait for another day. The words struck her, a mirror to her own life, cast down by society, yet still clinging to a sliver of light. Days later, Mercedes collapsed in a fit of coughing, her face flushed and lips pale. Panic rippled through the group. No one had medicine. Jack pounded the ground in despair. "If we had money, just a few pills." Isabella's hands shook as she searched her bag. At last, she pulled out a handkerchief, unfinished embroidery, the only keepsake from her room. The cloth she had stitched while singing to her baby. She pressed it to her chest, torn in two. But as Mercedes gasped weakly, Isabella's decision crystallized. She rose to her feet. "I'll be back." An hour later, she returned, clutching a blister pack of antibiotics. The handkerchief was gone. Her face was pale, but her eyes glowed with quiet triumph. "I traded it. We have medicine." Mercedes wept, clutching Isabella's hand. "You've saved me, child." Howard looked long at her, then nodded. His voice rasped but steady. "You understand now. To give is to lose a little, but to keep your humanity. That is something no society can take away." Isabella turned aside, tears burning her eyes. For the first time in weeks, a fragile seed of hope stirred. She had been cast out, condemned, left to sleep under bridges. But still, she could save someone. Still, she had worth. That night, she closed her eyes, whispering the name she carried like a heartbeat, Ethan. Your mother can still do good. If you ever think of me, you'll know I never gave up. The wind rushed through the arches above, blending with the steady breathing of her companions. Beneath the cracked concrete in the forgotten dark, a fragile family had taken root, and in its warmth, Isabella found a reason to keep walking forward. Chapter 6. Ethan, fading. On the third night after Isabella's departure, the Carter mansion drowned in the sound of Ethan's cries. The wails rattled through every corridor, rising to the high ceilings, bouncing off marble walls until the entire house seemed to pulse with desperation. Daniel paced the halls with his son in his arms, sweat breaking across his brow. Ethan, please, stop crying. His voice trembled, more worn than in any boardroom battle of his life. Melissa hovered nearby, brow furrowed, holding out a freshly mixed bottle. But when she tried to press the rubber nipple to the child's lips, Ethan turned away, shrieking louder, his tiny hands pushing her off with surprising force. I don't understand, Melissa muttered under her breath. He's just a baby. Why so stubborn? Daniel's eyes blazed, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. He's not stubborn. He's in pain. He pulled Ethan close, chest splitting with helplessness. The boy's face was crimson, breath-ragged lips darkening to a frightening shade of blue. In those tiny eyes, Daniel saw a silent plea for help. And the cruelest truth was this: he had no idea how to save his own child. That night, Ethan finally collapsed into sleep, not out of comfort but sheer exhaustion. Daniel sank into the armchair, burying his face in his hands. He was no longer a CEO, no longer a man of control and authority. He was only a father, powerless in a gilded mansion that felt emptier than ever, listening to his baby cry himself hoarse. By morning, Ethan's condition had worsened. His fever-spiked breath, shallow lips cracked. His cries had grown faint, more like a fraying thread than a voice. Daniel stormed into the hospital, his shirt wrinkled, his face pale from sleepless nights. Nurses rushed Ethan into a sterile room, laying him on a small bed, strapping monitors to his chest, inserting an IV into his fragile vein. Daniel pressed his hand to the glass window eyes, bloodshot, barely breathing as doctors swarmed around his son. At last the door opened. Dr. Villanueva, one of the city's leading pediatricians, removed his glasses and looked at Daniel with heavy eyes. Mr. Carter, your son has no major physical illness, but his condition is extremely dangerous. He refuses to feed, refuses the bottle, refuses all ordinary comfort. This is the mark of psychological crisis in an infant. Daniel's voice rasped, disbelieving. Psychological crisis. He's only 2 months old. The doctor nodded gravely. Yes, adults think infants are too young to feel such loss. The truth is, they are far more sensitive than we realize. Your son has lost his primary bond. His body is responding by rejecting life itself. Daniel felt the words hit like lightning. His hands trembled violently. Are you saying Ethan is giving up? The doctor's eyes did not waver. He needs someone he trusts. A voice, a scent, a familiar embrace. Without that connection, his body will fail quickly. And if that happens, he paused. Medicine cannot bring him back. Daniel staggered back, spine striking the wall. The lights blurred, the steady beeping of monitors grew distant. Only one sentence echoed over and over. He needs someone he trusts. And with it, an image: Isabella in the armchair. Ethan nestled in her arms, silent and serene, clutching her blouse as though it was life itself. Daniel buried his face in his hands, chest convulsing. The horror sank in like poison. He had driven away the only person who could save his son. Inside the white hospital room, the sterile walls pressed closer, threatening to suffocate him. Ethan lay small and fragile, wires trailing from his body. His eyelids fluttered, his breath so faint, Daniel leaned close just to hear it. He sat beside the bed, wrapping his large hand around the tiny, cold fingers of his son. Ethan, my boy. No reply came, only the fragile rhythm of the monitor. The screen traced out weak, trembling peaks. Daniel lowered his cheek to Ethan's hand, and terror rose sharp and merciless, the terror of losing another soul he loved. the terror of reliving Claire's death this time, watching his own flesh and blood slip away. Melissa slipped in, setting a cup of coffee down with a sharp clink. "Mr. Carter, you must rest. You haven't slept in 3 nights." Daniel didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the tiny figure on the bed, his world narrowing to the fragile heartbeat of his son. "Get out!" Daniel's voice was raw, torn by sleepless nights. Melissa froze her face, draining of color. For a moment she looked as if she might argue, but something in his eyes silenced her. Without a word she turned and slipped away, leaving only the sound of Ethan's fragile breathing. Daniel turned back to his son, his gaze bloodshot, his heart breaking. He whispered as if confessing to the silence itself. "I was wrong, Ethan. I thought I was protecting you. But I stole from you the only arms that made you feel safe." The tears he had buried for days finally spilled, falling hot onto the tiny hand he held. He pressed trembling kisses to each small finger, choking on the words, "I'm sorry. Please don't leave me." The doctor's warning hammered in his skull. He needs someone he trusts. Not him, not Melissa, only Isabella. Daniel rose sharply, gripping the window ledge as lightning split the sky. Outside, the city bled with rain-glass towers swallowed in storm. In his chest, a question pounded like thunder. Is it too late to find her? He turned back. Ethan writhed faintly, lips darker now, chest heaving with shallow gasps. The sight struck him like a final summons. His pulse roared, his heart beating like war drums. If he did nothing, he would lose everything. That night the storm unleashed its fury. Rain lashed against the hospital windows. Thunder growled as if the heavens themselves grieved. In the sterile glow of neon lights, Daniel sat stiff beside his son's bed, every breath of the child a knife to the gut. He brushed a trembling hand through Ethan's damp hair, whispering with fierce resolve, "My boy, I'll bring her back. The one who can make you smile. I swear it." The door creaked. Dr. Villanueva stepped in, his expression heavy. "If there's no improvement, we'll have to begin artificial feeding. But..." He paused, sighing deeply. There is no substitute for the bond he's lost. As the doctor left, Daniel surged to his feet. Rage at himself, grief, and a desperate kind of love twisted together inside him until he shook. He grabbed his coat and keys. Melissa darted into the hall, panic flashing across her face. "Mr. Carter, where are you going in the middle of a storm?" Daniel stopped in the doorway, eyes dark, voice ringing like iron. "To find the only person who can save my son." She flinched at his tone. When his gaze cut through her, she stepped back. The door slammed shut, the sound echoing like a verdict. Moments later, his black car roared from the hospital lot, headlights cutting through sheets of rain. The wipers thrashed across the windshield, but all Daniel saw was white water and the echo of his own vow. "Even if I have to tear this city apart, even if I lose every shred of my reputation, I will find Isabella. For him, for us." Back inside the ward, Ethan stirred. His lashes fluttered, his lips parted weakly. A broken sound slipped from him, almost a name. "Sa." As if by instinct, the child already knew his father had begun the journey to bring back the arms he had lost. Chapter 7. The Search in the Rain. The storm turned the city into a drowning maze. Daniel's car plowed through flooded streets, wipers thrashing back and forth, but the world ahead remained a blur of white water. Each time the tires skidded on slick pavement, his heart jolted, but his foot never eased off the gas. At every awning he pulled over, leaning into the rain, calling out to the shivering figures huddled there. "Have you seen her?" A young woman, thin dark hair, carrying a cloth bag. They only shook their heads, eyes wary. One drunken man snapped back, "What are you, a cop? Nobody keeps track of names out here." Daniel swallowed the sting. He wasn't a CEO now, not the powerful man who commanded boardrooms. He was only a father wild with desperation, searching for the one soul who could save his child. Rain streaked the glass like the tears he refused to shed. The doctor's words rang again. He needs someone he trusts. And Daniel's heart answered with a single name, Isabella. For 3 nights he hardly slept. He scoured the poorest blocks, knocked on the doors of crumbling hostels, whispered her name in every alley, but the answers never changed. No one by that name. Don't know her. By the fourth night, when his hope was all but gone, his phone buzzed. A trembling female voice came through. Mr. Carter. My name is Monica. I live in the next district. Yesterday I saw a girl who looked like the one you described. She was headed toward the Caracas Bridge. Daniel gripped the wheel until his knuckles whitened. Thank you. Thank you. The car tore through the storm. The city was dark and silent, the wind howling between towers. His pulse pounded, fearing the lead was nothing but a ghost. Do you believe a sliver of hope can carry someone through despair? That a single flicker can steady a man on the edge of ruin? His car screeched to a halt at Caracas Bridge. The night here was thick, the glow of street lamps faint and scattered. Rain stung his face as he ran down the muddy embankment, each step sinking deep. Under the bridge, the smell of wet moss and half-burned wood filled the air. A cluster of homeless souls huddled near a fire. They rose warily as he approached. An old man with silver hair and a cane stepped forward. Who are you looking for? Daniel's voice cracked raw with pleading. Isabella. Please tell me where she is. My son. My son is dying. Only she can save him. For a long moment, no one spoke. Their faces were worn, their eyes hard with caution. At last, the old man exhaled, lifting his cane to point toward a dark corner. Daniel turned, his heart split open. She was there. Isabella curled against the wall, a torn blanket draped around her shoulders, hair tangled and wet. Her face was hollow, her cheekbones sharp, her breath shallow. At the sound of his steps, her eyes fluttered open. She flinched, pulling back. Daniel? Her voice was hoarse, so faint it could have been the wind. He dropped to his knees before her, hands shaking as he reached for her thin arm. Rain and tears blurred together on his face as he whispered, It was me, Isabella. I was wrong. Please, please save my son. Ethan needs you. He misses you. A bitter, broken laugh slipped from her lips, soaked in tears. I saved him once, and the city condemned me. And you cast me out into the rain. What more do you want from me? Daniel bowed his head, shoulders trembling. I don't ask forgiveness. Only this: save him. Please. Silence pressed heavy beneath the bridge. The rain hammered the roof above like a merciless clock. Isabella's hands gripped her blanket, shaking as the storm inside her raged, betrayal, fear of being used again, and the memory of Ethan's cries. At last her tears broke. They mingled with the rain as she whispered, I'll go, but not for you, only for Ethan. Daniel lifted his head, eyes shining with desperate relief. He nodded again and again, like a drowning man clutching a rope. I understand. Just come with me. I swear, I'll never let you be hurt again. Howard, the old man, studied Daniel long and hard before speaking. Go, child. The boy needs you. But if he fails you once more, he'll answer to us. Daniel turned, voice choked. I swear on everything I have. He slipped off his heavy coat and draped it over Isabella's shoulders. For the first time in weeks, a faint glimmer lit her weary eyes. She rose slowly, and together they stepped out into the storm. Two figures swallowed by rain, walking toward a fate neither could escape. Do you believe in the power of forgiveness? If you were Isabella, would you return knowing the risk of another wound? Chapter 8. The Hospital Miracle. The central hospital blazed with white light, a fortress of glass against the storm outside. Rain hammered the city, thunder rolling, but within those walls came a different storm. Hurried footsteps of doctors, the blare of ambulance sirens, the relentless hum of machines. The moment Isabella stepped beneath the glass awning, it swallowed her whole. She froze. Water dripped from her hair, running down a face pale with fear. Her thin dress clung to her frame, her shoes squelched with every step. Under that cold, fluorescent glow, she felt smaller than ever so small. She might vanish. I can't go in, she whispered, clutching the coat Daniel had draped around her. Her eyes darted to the sliding doors where clean, polished strangers swept past. They belonged here. She did not. This place isn't for me. I'm just a disgraced servant. Daniel stopped, turned to face her. His eyes ringed with exhaustion, still burned steady. His voice was rough but unshakable. No, Isabella. Tonight you're not a servant. Tonight you're the only one who can save my son. The words struck her like lightning. Her heart pounded wildly. The savior of Ethan. She shut her eyes and the memories came: Ethan's red face, his cracked lips, the tiny hands clawing for warmth. Her chest ached, her body trembling. Then with a long, shaking breath, she stepped forward. The doors parted and the flood of sterile light poured over them. Whispers rippled instantly. Isn't that the girl from the rumors? What is she doing here? The sting of their voices sliced at Isabella's skin. She wanted to shrink, to run. But then Daniel's hand closed over hers, firm, warm, steady. He leaned close, his whisper like a vow. Straight ahead. Ignore them. Our son is waiting. Our son. The words made her chest quake, her eyes blur. She didn't dare look at him, but she didn't let go either. Step by trembling step, she walked toward the door where life and death balanced on a thread. The room was blinding white. Machines beeped in fragile rhythm, each note a reminder of how little time was left. Ethan lay so small, tangled in wires, his lips dark, his chest heaving. Each breath looked borrowed, fragile as glass. Isabella froze at the threshold, her hands shaking. Could this broken child truly be the same one who once smiled at her breast? Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, voice low, aching. Go to him, Isabella. He's waiting. As if in answer, Ethan whimpered, a pitiful sound from dry lips. The cry pierced her. She rushed forward, collapsing into the chair at his bedside. Her tears blurred everything as she whispered, Ethan, baby, Mommy's here. His eyes flickered open, clouded, weak. But at the sound of her voice, his body jolted. Tiny hands reached, blindly searching. Isabella sobbed, catching them in her palms. She lifted him gently, pressing him to her chest. And in that moment, miracle. The crying ceased. His breath steadied. The blue faded from his lips, color blooming pink across his cheeks. He nestled against her, eyes drifting closed, sinking into peace, as if death itself had been held at bay by her arms. The room went silent. A nurse covered her mouth, tears in her eyes. Dr. Villanueva froze, awed. Daniel stood behind them, his chest heaving, tears streaming unchecked. Isabella clutched Ethan tighter, whispering through her sobs, You missed me that much. Forgive me. I'll never leave you again. The boy didn't answer, but his breathing did. His warmth did. The peace on his face did. Daniel collapsed into the chair beside them, covering his face with both hands. The billionaire CEO, the man of steel, now nothing but a father broken open by the simplest truth, a mother's embrace. Villanueva approached, eyes shining with reverence. His voice carried both wonder and certainty. Incredible. No machines, no medicine could do this. What your son needed was her. The bond cannot be replaced. All eyes turned to Isabella. She gazed down at the child, tears streaking her cheeks, but her smile soft and pure like an angel cradling life itself. And then Daniel moved. He stepped forward, dropped to his knees beside her chair. His voice shattered as he lifted his tear-streaked face. Isabella, I'm the worst kind of man. She startled, staring down at him. He continued, words breaking like glass. I believed lies. I let pride blind me. I threw you out in the rain like nothing, and because of my arrogance, I nearly killed my own son. The room stilled. A CEO, a man millions feared and revered, knelt now in tears. Daniel bowed his head, his voice breaking open. I don't ask forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I beg only this: don't leave Ethan again. He needs you. And God help me. So do I. Isabella froze. His words seared her. The memory of that night, his cruel command, You're fired. The shame, the rain, the endless whispers. It all came rushing back. But then, Ethan stirred softly against her chest, breathing steady, clinging to her blouse with tiny fingers. Her tears fell like rain as she whispered, I'll stay. But only for Ethan. Daniel lifted his face, wrecked yet radiant. He nodded again and again, whispering, "That's enough. Just stay." And in that room, no one saw disgrace. No one saw servant or master. They saw only life, returned love, reborn, and a family forming in the ashes of pride. Days passed. Light warmed the room. Ethan's cheeks filled with color, his giggles returning like birds after a storm. Each time his tiny hand wrapped around Isabella's finger, the air itself seemed to glow. Daniel watched quietly, often from the corner. Each kiss she pressed to the child's forehead stabbed him with guilt and lit him with hope. He knew she had given him a second chance. One evening, sunlight spilled golden through the window. Daniel approached softly, watching Isabella rock Ethan in her arms. His voice was low, stripped of armor. "I lost Claire forever. I can't lose Ethan. And Isabella, I don't want to lose you either." She stiffened, staring at the boy instead of him. Inside her raged every memory of betrayal, every night under the bridge, every cruel whisper. Part of her longed to turn away, but as she looked at Ethan's peaceful face, her heart softened. Her answer came barely above a breath. "I'll stay. For Ethan." Daniel stood silent for a long while. Then he nodded, lips pressed tight, but in his eyes burned a vow he would spend the rest of his life turning for Ethan into for us. Beyond the window, dawn spread across the city, the storm long gone. And in that fragile light, three shadows leaned together, no longer master and servant, no longer fractured by loss, but something new, something whole. Do you believe that after the worst storms, people can still find their sunrise? If it were you, would you give Daniel the chance to turn remorse into love? Chapter 9. The Public Redemption. The hospital room was hushed, broken only by Ethan's soft breathing and sleep. Afternoon sunlight slanted through the window, casting golden warmth across his rosy cheeks. Isabella sat beside the bed, stroking the fine strands of his hair, her face at last softened after so many days carved by tears. Daniel stood nearby. His eyes didn't rest on the child, but on her. Every gentle touch she gave Ethan sent an ache straight through his chest. He knew this woman hadn't just saved his son. She had pulled him back from the edge, too. He turned to Dr. Villanueva, voice low. "Doctor, if I tell the truth, if I speak it openly, will the world still condemn her?" Villanueva held his gaze. "Only truth can free her. If you remain silent, the stain will never wash away. Not from her, and not from you." That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He stood at the hospital window, city lights flickering like restless eyes. In his ears echoed the cruel laughter of neighbors, the venom of phone calls, the cutting stares at Isabella. He gripped his phone, whispering as if to swear before heaven itself tomorrow. "I'll speak. To the whole world." By morning, the hospital's grand hall was overflowing with reporters. Cameras clicked, flashes exploded, microphones craned forward. Word had spread like wildfire. CEO Daniel Carter calls an emergency press conference. On the front row sat the familiar faces of high society. Patricia, the neighbor who had planted the first seed of gossip, perched stiffly in her seat. Others who once whispered behind their fans now leaned in, eager for spectacle. Was this the fall of a tycoon or his vindication? The air grew tight, heavy, expectant. Then the doors opened. Daniel walked out in his tailored suit, though exhaustion shadowed every line of his face. And he was not alone. Isabella followed, plain hospital dress hair, pulled back, cheeks hollowed by suffering. Yet in her arms lay Ethan, wrapped in a thin blanket, sleeping in the peace she had given him. A ripple shot through the room. Cameras fired. Voices hissed. "That's her, the servant girl. Why bring the child? Is the rumor true?" Then Daniel climbed to the podium, lifting a hand for silence. The room obeyed. His eyes swept the hall, then returned to Isabella as if to draw strength from her presence. His voice rang deep, hoarse, but clear. "There is a truth I should have spoken long ago." The room held its breath. Isabella Torres is not delusional. She's not obsessed with my son, as the rumors claimed. The truth is the opposite. She saved his life when no one else would. Gasps rose a storm of whispers. Pens scratched, cameras flared, but Daniel pressed on. That night, when Ethan's cries had turned to silence, when his bottle soured, when his nurse abandoned him, it was Isabella who stepped forward. She risked shame, scorn, everything to keep him alive. Without her, my son would not be here today. His voice broke. He looked down, swallowing hard. And I made the greatest mistake of my life. I believed the lies. I cast her out. I left her to endure humiliation while I clung to my pride. And in doing so, I nearly lost my child. The hall was still. Reporters forgot to type. Even the wealthy women in their pearls lowered their eyes. Daniel raised his head and his gaze burned with resolve. I apologized to Isabella Torres. I apologized to my son. And I apologized to every ear that heard the falsehoods. The truth is this: she saved my family. And from this day on, I will defend her as my own. The floodgates opened. Questions crashed like waves. Why speak now? Mr. Carter, do you know the harm your silence caused her? How will you make amends? Daniel stood firm. Because silence nearly killed us all. Because I alone must bear responsibility. And because no rumor, no whisper will ever again be allowed to wound her. At the side row, Patricia shrank in her seat, shame flushing her cheeks as others' glares cut sharp. In the corner, Melissa trembled. The cameras swung her way. A reporter shouted, "Was it you who spread the lies, Miss Adams?" Her voice cracked. I didn't." But Daniel's voice sliced through, cold as steel. "Yes, she slandered Isabella. And today I announce Melissa Adams is dismissed permanently." A roar swept the room. Cameras flashed mercilessly. Melissa stumbled out, weeping, her heels clattering down the marble aisle, the final fall of a woman who once played with another's dignity. And Isabella? She sat silent. Ethan nestled in her arms. The chaos swirled, but to her it all faded. All she could hear was her child's steady breathing. All she could feel was a burden lifting at last. Daniel descended the podium and stood before her. His voice carried over the microphones, firm enough to echo into headlines. "This is no servant. This is my son's savior. This is family." Tears slid freely down Isabella's cheeks, but they were no longer born of shame. They were tears of release. When the press conference ended, even the harshest faces had softened. No one looked at her with contempt. Some looked with pity, others with quiet guilt. A young reporter edged closer, microphone trembling. "Miss Torres, do you wish to say anything?" Isabella's lips trembled, then curved into the faintest smile. She shook her head. No words were needed. The truth was alive in her arms. Outside, the world erupted. Headlines reversed, coarse social feeds aflame. She was the hero all along. We believed lies. We owe her an apology. A nanny-turned-savior society must reckon with its cruelty. And inside, before the cameras still rolling, Daniel did something no one expected. He dropped to one knee before her, before everyone. His voice was low, but it carried like a vow. "Isabella, before every witness here, I swear you will never be harmed again. I will guard you, as I guard my own heart." Her eyes widened, tears spilling once more. She did not answer, only clutched Ethan closer. Yet somewhere deep within the ice around her heart began to crack. And the cameras captured it all, the image of a billionaire kneeling, a woman once despised, now vindicated, and a child sleeping in the arms that saved him. Not just news, but a symbol that truth can be restored, that dignity can be reclaimed, and that love sometimes begins in the ashes of shame. If you were Isabella after all the betrayal and humiliation, would you let yourself forgive? Or would you keep the walls high around your heart, even as the world finally bows to the truth? Chapter 10. A new family. After the press conference, the atmosphere inside the Carter estate shifted completely. No more whispers of suspicion. No more sidelong glances of doubt. Instead, the wide marble halls began to echo with something new: laughter. The laughter of a child. Ethan had grown stronger. His bright eyes sparkled whenever Isabella entered the room. His first babbles, his first unsteady steps across the nursery floor. All of it brought tears streaming down Isabella's cheeks. Daniel was never far, no longer the CEO buried in contracts, but a patient father, arms open, ready to catch his son with each wobbly stride. One evening, Daniel lingered at the doorway as Isabella bent over Ethan's crib. The soft lamplight painted her face in gold, her hand stroking the boy's hair until his eyelids fluttered shut. It was such a simple picture, yet to Daniel it was a miracle, something he had thought lost forever the day Claire died. He whispered to himself, voice breaking, This is what family really means." That weekend, Daniel surprised them both with a drive. He refused to say where until the car pulled to a stop. When Isabella stepped out, her breath caught. It was the park. The very place where months ago she had shivered alone in the rain, clutching a thin blanket for warmth. But today, it was transformed. The grass glowed green under the late sun. A blanket was already spread, a picnic basket waiting with fruit and bread, and beside it a brand new teddy bear. Isabella clutched Ethan to her chest, her heart twisting with memories of that night. But as she looked at the sunlight, at the small boy's laughter, at the man waiting for her with a gentle smile, those memories softened, washed clean. Daniel walked forward, his voice low but steady. "That night, I left you here in the dark. Today I want to replace that memory with something new. A memory for the three of us." Her eyes brimmed. She couldn't speak. She only nodded, and for the first time, she laid a family blanket on the grass, not as an outcast, but as someone who belonged. When Ethan tired himself running in circles, his giggles floating on the breeze, Daniel sat down beside Isabella. He reached for her hand. The warmth of the evening wrapped around them, carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass. His voice trembled, yet carried a strength she had never heard before. "Isabella, I lost a wife. I lost my faith, and I almost lost my son. But because of you, I have them back. All of them." He paused, eyes distant, then returned to hers. "I used to think honor was measured in reputation, in what others said about me. But now I know true honor is whether I can protect the ones I love." From his jacket, he drew a small velvet box. Inside, a ring caught the glow of the dying sun. And right there on the grass, where once she had cried alone, Daniel knelt. "Isabella Torres, give me this chance. Let me be your husband, and the father Ethan already believes me to be. Will you marry me?" The world seemed to stop. Isabella's heart pounded. Memories surged, the shame, the cold stares, the nights beneath bridges. Yet also Ethan's tiny fingers gripping her blouse, his laughter ringing like bells in Daniel's eyes. Now, eyes of a man who had learned to kneel for love. Tears spilled freely. She covered her mouth with trembling fingers. And then slowly, surely she nodded. Yes. Daniel slid the ring onto her hand, his own shaking. The moment the band settled, sunlight broke fully across them, bathing the grass in molten gold. Ethan, as if sensing everything, toddled over with arms outstretched. Laughing, Isabella and Daniel opened their arms, and he collapsed into their embrace. The three clung together, laughter and sobs mingling in one sound, the sound of a family reborn. Passers-by stopped, some with tears, some with smiles. None remembered the rumors. None remembered the shame. They saw only what was true. Love hard won and wholly binding three souls as one. Isabella pressed her cheek to Daniel's shoulder, whispering through her tears, "I thought I'd never have a home again. But now, I have you. I have Ethan. That's everything." Daniel pulled them close, voice thick, but certain. "This is our new beginning, Isabella. The beginning of us." Beneath the blazing sunset, their shadows merged on the grass, no longer billionaire and servant, no longer fractured lives. Just husband, wife, and child. Just family. Do you believe love can truly heal the deepest wounds, turn strangers into family, and turn shame into something sacred? Late afternoon, the park glowed with golden light from the setting sun. The picnic blanket still lay on the grass, the basket half opened, but no one cared anymore. All eyes, all hearts were drawn only to the three souls holding one another tight. Daniel knelt down, the wedding ring gleaming on Isabella's hand. Tears streamed down her cheeks, yet they were tears of joy, happiness so pure it washed away years of shame and suffering. Ethan toddled toward them, his tiny arms wrapping around both parents, his laughter ringing like church bells scattering the last traces of darkness. The scene looked like a timeless painting, a man who once lived in pride now learning to bow for love. A woman once condemned now honored as the heart of a home, and a child innocent and bright becoming the bridge that bound love into wholeness. Daniel pressed his forehead to Isabella's whispering words, the evening wind carried across the park. Family is not only blood, it is love and sacrifice. And that single truth silenced every cruel rumor, every mocking glance. And at the same time, it opened the first page of a new chapter 1, written not with pride and judgment, but with trust, courage, and forgiveness. As night descended, what remained was more than a perfect ending. It was a lesson that sometimes to protect a family, you must surrender your pride, you must kneel, you must ask forgiveness, and you must dare to love again. None of us chooses where we begin, but each of us can choose how to love. And it is love, not wealth, not reputation, that creates a true family. If you were the CEO in this story, would you listen to the voices of society? Or would you follow your heart? Share your thoughts in the comments below and tell us, how would you rate this story from 0 to 10? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next stories where love, faith, and sacrifice always find their way home.